So, good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you back to this class of video lecture. This is BA Part 1 English Literature, Paper 1 Poetry and Drama. And, friends, in continuation with the poems which we have been doing so far, today we check up a very famous poem by Andrew Marvell, Thoughts in a Garden. The title of the poem is Thoughts in a Garden. So, before I come to the poem, let us have a brief outlook of the poet Andrew Marvell. He was a representative poet of the 17th century British literature. Marvell was born in 1621. This is the year of Marvell's birth. He was the son of a school teacher. He was a tutor to the daughter of Lord Fairfax, worked as Latin secretary to Milton, and became a member of Parliament. Milton was, after Restoration, protected by powerful friends who had influenced at court, and Marble probably was one of them. So it is very much clear from the literary records of Marvell's poetic career that Marvell received a sort of influence from Milton, a man of Renaissance and a very renowned poet of English literature who wrote one and the only epic, Paradise Lost. As a Puritan, he was an admirer of Cromwell. Yes, like Milton, Marvell was also a Puritan. Puritanism was a creed which flourished in the 17th century England. And friends, as I often underscore the significance of literary terms, so Puritanism is one of the important literary terms, and Puritanism looks for a simplification of church rules, of rituals, of all worldly customs and traditions. It underlines only the purity of mind and heart, and it wants to minimize all worldly traditions. So it was the creed very much popular in the 17th century England. So, like Milton, Marvell was also an admirer of Cromwell. Cromwell was the Oliver Cromwell. Under his leadership and supervision, the parliamentary forces took over England, and for at least 7 years the reign continued. But later on, monarchy was again restored in 1660. So it's a different matter. We are not going into much detail of the reign of Cromwell and the consistent struggle between the king and the parliamentary forces. Milton was with the parliamentary forces. Milton was a staunch believer in democracy. So I come to Marvel. So, as a Puritan, he was an admirer of Cromwell, a devout reader of the Bible, and a supporter of the joyless regime after the execution of uh, Charles I. But his private voice, as revealed in his poem, is bright, humorous, tolerant, and civilized. He is a lover of gardens. Marvell has been a lover of nature. His political career, his satires, and the controversies he indulged in are forgotten now in because of two facts: his friendship with Milton and some intensely felt yet fanciful poems. Religion has far less place in his poems than in those of others. So it was a brief outline of Marvell as a poet, as a man of letters, as an individual. his important part of life is that he was close friend to Milton. Now the present poem, Thoughts in a Garden, is a famous poem on nature, on gardens, on natural artifacts. The present poem, Marvell's Thoughts in a Garden, foreshadows Keats's by its sensuousness and Wordsworth by its optimistic and meditative mood. Yes, two ways could be applied for analysis of this poem. In this poem, Keats's sensuousness is apparent. Keats's sensuousness could be seen as an important part, and we can see the optimistic and meditative mood of Wordsworth. As friends, as we move on in British literature, we keep on moving in British literature. Finally, we find that with the rise of Romanticism, we see the rise of Wordsworth, we see the rise of Shelley, Keats, these great romantic poets. And Keats is known for beauty and sensuousness. Keats wants to enjoy nature by his senses, by the sense of sight, sense of touch, sense of smell, right? So we could see that particular approach in this poem, Thoughts in a Garden. And there is an optimistic mood. Yes, friends, the poets are always optimistic, they are never pessimistic. They have a sort of bright vision for the world, for the civilization, for the culture, for the suffering humanity. So a poet can never be pessimistic. A poet can never be of negative thoughts. So there is an optimistic mood. There is a bright mood on the part of the poet. And the poet is meditative. He is contemplating on nature, on flowers, on scenes, on morning scenes, on nights, whatever appeals to man, to mind, is a part of consideration for the poet. So, optimistic and meditative mood. He expresses himself with liveliness and happy audacity. He is a poet of the second line. To rank among the greatest, he should, according to Professor Ligius, I quote, have had a more exacting standard of art and perhaps a more wholehearted devotion to poetry, as well as those supreme qualities of mastery of the word and the line which are the glory of the other Puritan poet, John Milton. I unquote. So, Professor Ligius remarks in this way of the poem written by Marvell. Friends, the present poem, Thoughts in a Garden, was perhaps written when Marvell was acting as a tutor to the daughter of Lord Fairfax. Yes, this question comes in examination. He wrote this poem when he was acting as a tutor to the daughter of Lord Fairfax. It reveals his love for nature. Andrew Marvell proceeds with simple premises. He then takes us back to the golden age of innocence and happiness. Yes, the golden age of innocence and happiness is sung in the poem. The poet suggests that we have lost that age by our own doings. In a way, the poem has some match with the poem written by Wordsworth, The World is Too Much With Us, as we teach this poem in second year. I quote the opening lines of the poem. The world is too much with us late and soon, getting and spending we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts to a sordid boon, the sun that the moon, the sea that bears her bosom to the moon. These are the opening lines of the poem. The world is too much with us, written by William Wordsworth. So the poem has a historical significance, and the poet says that the earth, the planet, this particular place, this particular abode was full of innocence, purity, innocence, and that was the time of golden era. But now that golden era has got shattered, has got broken into pieces, and we human beings, it is our folly which is responsible for the loss. We lost that age by our own doings. The poem has a historical significance too. It embodies the love for nature and the quiet life which were to be developed by Wordsworth. The poem has the quality of sensuousness, food for kids in the latter part of the first quarter of the 19th century. Marvell has some of the characteristics of metaphysical poetry at the same time, like John Donne. Again, you see, friends, again a term comes, the metaphysical poetry. With all this, the poem is marked with clarity, a feature hardly visible in the poet of the time. So I read the opening lines of the poem so that you may pick up the theme of the poem. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak, or bays, and their incessant labours see, crowned from some single herb or tree, whose short and narrow words shed does prudently their toils upbraid, while all flowers and all trees do close to weave the garlands of repose. So, in the poem, as we see in The World is Too Much with Us, written by Wordsworth, there is a pain on the part of the poet which he expresses clearly, candidly. And what is that pain? What is that concern? The poets are sensible by nature, they are sensitive by nature, they are sensitive by nature. That's why they feel pain for the suffering humanity, and they recognize the real reason behind this suffering. And they clearly, with all their perception, they express this pain through the rhymes, through the poems. So here in the opening of Thoughts in a Garden, the poet is pained to see that people have no time to enjoy the beauty of nature. They have no time, they have got cut from the world of nature, which is natural, which is real, which is upright, which is pure. And what do they do? In what affairs, in what activities do they waste their time and energy? They waste their spiritual energy, they kill their spiritual pursuits. The poet says in the opening, they struggle hard to win glory in different spheres of life, but that labor is of no real importance. They struggle hard to win glory, firstly in the domain of politics, secondly, they struggle hard to win glory in the domain of war, then they struggle hard to win recognition in the domain of poetry. But all that labor is of no use, because all such glory cannot provide mental peace. That's why the poet says, how vainly, foolishly, all these attempts on the part of man have no significance, because how vainly men themselves amaze, they want to obtain acclaim and recognition, to win glory, to win, Machiavelli says a very famous political thinker, that every human being has three characteristic features which is invariably found in every man. What is that? That every man wants to have popularity. He wants to be famous. The first weakness on the part of man. The second weakness which is found in man, that every human being wants to be a great figure of this world. And the third weakness which is found in man, that he he wants to be the king of the world. You see, so these three characteristic features are found in man as per the Machiavellian thought, that everyone wants to be popular, wants to be famous, and wants to be great, right? And I repeat and I correct myself, that the third individual feature which is found in man, that every man wants to dominate that particular man who is inferior to him. So there lies domination in man. He wants to exploit which is weaker, which is less powerful, which is unprivileged, right? So the poet is pained to see that people have no time to enjoy the beauty of nature. They struggle hard to win glory in different spheres of life, firstly in the field of politics, then in the field of war, then in the field of poetry. But this all labor is useless, because these efforts cannot provide mental peace. Finally, peace and contentment is required for man. For a long time, the poet searched for quiet and innocence in man's company, but in vain. Yes, for a, this is revelation, this is realization, and this is knowledge and wisdom, that poet looked for calmness. The poet looked for innocence in the company of man, but that innocence, that calmness, that quietness could never be found in the company of man, and the poet finally returned to the world of nature, right? Because man's nature is beyond prediction. Sometimes he behaves like a great person, behaves like a great man, and sometimes he behaves like a devil. All these thoughts are well expressed by Alexander Pope when he writes a poem, Essays on Man. So I think there is a problem of space. So again I repeat the first opening lines of the poem. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak or bays, and their incessant labour see, crowned from some single herb or tree, whose short and narrow versed shed does prudently their toils upbraid, while all flowers and trees do close to weave the garlands of repose. So we do the remaining part of the poem in the next class. Thank you, friends.